Hello beautiful, hey handsome. Today's video is gonna be epic. So not long ago, I released a video on equilibrium of forces and moments, and I got a couple of reactions on that video. So the very first thing I want to talk about is a couple of people complained about the way I was too fast in the video, and I'm genuinely sorry for that. Another thing I noticed is that the majority has issues with resolution of forces, because in that particular questions that a couple of people pointed out that they didn't understand was actually the way I resolved the inclined force. Then I used it to take the moment of a force for the question. So here in this video, I'll be discussing resolution of forces so as to clear all doubts, and then I'll resolve the question, then solve a question on equilibrium of forces. So let's get straight into the video. So resolution of forces. What is resolution of forces? Resolution of forces involves resolving all oblique force into their perpendicular components, that is into the horizontal component and then to their vertical component, and then equating these forces that are directly opposite and their components along each axis. So we have two axes generally. We have the x-axis and we have the y-axis, right? This is the positive y-axis, this is the negative y-axis, this is the positive x-axis, and this is the negative x-axis, right? So yeah, this is the first thing that we need to establish. Now, what I did in that video that actually caused confusion, I'm going to clarify it now. So what I did was I said when a force is inclined to a particular axis and you are resolving that force to that same axis the force is making an angle with, the equivalent of that force along the axis is going to be the cos equivalent of the force. While if you are resolving the force to the other axis in which the force is not making an angle with, it will be the sine equivalent in that case. What do I mean by this? If I have this force now. This force is inclined along the x-axis. You would agree with me, right? So it is inclined along the x-axis and it does not make any angle with the y-axis, right? So now what I said is, if you want to resolve this force along this x-axis, that is the axis the force is making an angle with, it is going to be the cos equivalent of this force. That is the x component now. The x component of this force is going to be P cos 30. This was what I did, all right? If you are resolving a force to the axis in which the force is making an angle with, it is going to be the cos equivalent of that force. And if you are resolving the force to the other axis in which the force is not making an angle with, it is going to be the sine equivalent of that force in that case. That is, the y component of P is going to be P sine 30. This forms the basis for resolution of forces. This is the basis of resolution of forces, all right? So let's go over this one more time. We have two axes. We have the y-axis, the vertical, and we have the x-axis, the horizontal. If we have a force that is inclined along any of these axes, for example this, we have a force P Newton, inclined along the x-axis. I now said if you want to resolve this force along that same axis, it is going to be the cos equivalent of that force. That is, the x component of this force now is going to be the P cos 30. That is the cos equivalent of that force. And if you want to resolve it along the other axis is not making an angle with now, that is y-axis, it is going to be the sine equivalent of the force in that case. So I want to believe you understand this, and I really seriously do hope you understand this. So let's take a question on this concept. All right, so let's take a look at this question now. We have this body we have this diagram. There is a horizontal force that is acting, that is pulling this body along this line. There is a weight suspended, all right, and then there is another inclined force along this axis. We have a force acting horizontally, we have a mass suspended, then we have a tension that is acting on it along this axis. So let us try. Remember when I was defining resolution of forces, I said resolving all oblique forces to their perpendicular axis, that is to the horizontal and to the vertical. After then, what do? You equate directly opposite forces along their components, basically. Now, let us try to bring this to 4 cardinal points. That is our normal 4 cardinal points that we know. So, we can have this. Now, there is an horizontal force. There is a weight suspended. This is a mass, but we have to convert it to a weight since we are working with forces. So we need to convert our mass to a force, to which is weight, right? So weight is equal to mass times acceleration due to gravity. So the vertical force suspended here is 150 Newton, right? We need to convert our mass to force since everything we are working with here are forces. A force F, a tension force, and then we now have a mass. So we need to convert that mass to a force, which is weight. And weight is mass times acceleration due to gravity, like I mentioned. So 15 multiplied by 10 will be 150 Newton. So let us bring all this now to the 4 cardinal points that we were talking about earlier. Here we have 150 Newton, right? Now we have a tension force that is inclined. This is where it becomes dicey. We have a tension force that is inclined, and they told us what, 30 degrees to the vertical. You see, it was inclined to the vertical here. The example I gave earlier, where I drew a force P, inclined it at 30 degrees. This was 30 degrees to the horizontal. Don't forget, I said when a force is inclined to the axis in which you want to resolve to, the component of that force along that axis will be the cos equivalent of that force. If you want to resolve a force to another axis, the force is not making an angle cos 30. Why was that? It was because P was making an angle with the horizontal. When we wanted to resolve to the vertical, we said it was what? P sin 30. That was because P was not making an angle with the vertical. When we wanted to resolve to the horizontal, P cos 30. When we wanted to resolve to the vertical, P sin 30. Why is that? It is not making angle with the vertical, it is making angle with the horizontal. Now, this is a twisted version, a little bit twisted. This tension is making an angle with the vertical. It is making a 30 degrees with the vertical, which means that what? When we want to resolve that force along vertical, it will be the cos equivalent of that force. And now when we want to resolve along horizontal, it will be the sine equivalent. Don't get it mixed up. I did not say anytime you are resolving a force to the horizontal, it must always be cos. That was not what I mentioned. And I did not say anytime you are resolving a force to the vertical, it must always be sine. That was not what I mentioned. What I said was that whenever you are resolving a force to an axis and the force is making an angle with that axis, that is either vertical or horizontal, the equivalent of that force along that axis will be the cos equivalent. That is, if I have this, I have a force Q that makes an angle of 45 degrees with the vertical. If I have this, if I want to resolve this force to the y-axis, that is to the vertical, it will be the sine equivalent of this force. And if I want to resolve this force to the horizontal, it will be the sine equivalent of the force. What do I mean by that? For this now, the y component will be Q cos 45. And the x component will be Q sine 45. I will say this again. I will continue saying it until I'm convinced you understand what I mean. If you are resolving a force to an axis and the force is making an angle with that axis, it will be the cos equivalent of that force. If you are resolving a force to an axis and the force is not making an angle with that axis, it will be the sine equivalent of that force. Here, P made an angle with 30 degrees to the horizontal. So if you want to resolve P to that same horizontal, it will be the cos. But if you want to resolve P to the vertical, remember P is not making an angle with the vertical. So it will be the sine equivalent of P in that case. This is another version. Q is making an angle with the vertical. So if I want to resolve Q is making an angle with the vertical. So if I want to resolve Q to that same vertical, it will be the cos equivalent of Q. That is, y component will be Q cos 45. Why is it cos? It is because Q is making an angle with the vertical that we are resolving it to. But then Q is not making an angle with the horizontal. So if I want to resolve Q to the horizontal, it will now be sine 45 because Q is not making an angle with the horizontal. So I think to an extent I'm convinced you understand. So let us solve our question now. Like I was saying, we have an F vertically, we have 150 Newton horizontally. We have a tension that is inclined along the vertical. So the effect, okay, so this is what we have basically. We have tension, and then we have it inclined to the vertical. This is basically an alternate angle. Alternate angles are equal. So if this is 30 degrees, this place will also be 30 degrees. So it is safe to say that we have 30 degrees here. Right? This is simple mathematics. 30 degrees here will also be 30 degrees since they are alternate angles, Z angles. So alternate angles will always be equal. So you have 30 degrees here also. Now, remember tension is making an angle with the vertical here, right? It is making an angle with the vertical. So it means if I am resolving tension to the vertical, it will be T cos 30. Cos 30 because it is making an angle with that same vertical. But if I am resolving tension to the horizontal, it will now be sine because tension is not making an angle with the horizontal. I want to believe we are clear on that. So let us get okay, so let us resolve this obliquely now. We've resolved force, we've resolved 150 Newton. We've not resolved our tension obliquely. So to resolve this obliquely, we have something like this. So this is what we have. Force 150 Newton, T cos 30 vertically and T sin 30 horizontally. Don't get it mixed up. Whenever you are resolving a force to an axis the force is making an angle with, it will be the cos equivalent of that force. Let's talk about that first. Tension is making an angle with the vertical, and then we are resolving tension to that same vertical. It will be the cos equivalent of tension. Settled. Whenever you are resolving a force to an axis the force is not making an angle with, it will be the sine equivalent of that force. Tension is not making an angle with the horizontal. So if I am resolving tension to the horizontal, it will be T sine 30. This is what I have. I believe we are clear on this. After resolving all oblique forces to their perpendicular axis, what's the next thing I said you will do? You equate directly opposite forces. You equate directly opposite forces. So this is acting along this direction, this is acting along this direction. So equating directly opposite forces now, T cos 30 is equal to 150 Newton. Abi, T cos 30 is along the positive y. 150 Newton is along the negative y. So they are directly opposite, right? So we equate them. T cos 30 is equal to 150. What's the value of cos 30? Cos 30 is 0.866. So this is the correct answer for the value of my tension, 173.2 Newton. I strongly believe you understand this. Let me walk you through the process through which I got my tension again. We have this system. a tension inclined at 30 degrees to the vertical, right? We have force. You understand how I got 150 Newton from 15 kilogram? Weight is equal to mass times gram. I cannot. Okay, so this is why we converted our mass to weight. I cannot equate a force to a mass. Force is not equal to a mass, right? F is not equal to m, but F is equal to mass times acceleration. Either acceleration, either linear acceleration, acceleration due to gravity, centripetal acceleration, any form of acceleration whatsoever. Force is equal to mass multiplied by acceleration, but force is not equal to mass. So for me to equate a force to be equal to mass, I need to convert the mass to a force first, which is weight in this case, and that is mass times acceleration due to gravity, and I got 150 Newton. So I don't think that should be a problem. So force 150 Newton. Now, how did I get my tension? I just basically brought this here, Abby. So tension is inclined at 30 degrees to the vertical. Don't forget, when you are resolving a force to an axis the force is making an angle with, the equivalent of the force is going to be the cos equivalent of the force along that axis. When you are resolving a force to a particular axis the force is making an angle with, the component of the force along that axis that is making an angle with will be the cos equivalent of the force. That is, tension is making 30 degrees with the vertical. So the equivalent of tension along the vertical will be the cos equivalent of tension. And that was what I did, T cos 30. Whenever you are resolving a force to the second axis, that is, the axis the force is not making angle with now, it is going to be the sine equivalent of that force. Tension is not making any angle with the horizontal. So it is going to be T sine 30 in this case. So we've gotten, so after you resolve your forces obliquely, what did I say? You equate directly opposite forces and then you get your answer. So T cos 30 is equal to 150 Newton. 150 over 0.86, cos 30 is 0.86. 150 over 0.866, you get 173.2 Newton. And that is the value of my tension. Now, to get my force my force is inclined along the horizontal. So what do? I equate my horizontal forces. T sine 30 is equal to force. T sine 30 is equal to force. Don't forget we have our tension already as 173.2 sine 30 is equal to force. Sine 30 is 0.5. My force is equal to 86.6 Newton. So this is the value of my force. So this is the correct value of my tension, and this is the correct value of my force. I believe you understand the whole gist behind resolution of forces now. So once you understand resolution of forces, the question that has been troubling the majority should not trouble you any longer. So you can go back and watch the video and watch how I solved the question, where I resolved a particular inclined force. I know I did not explain very well how I resolved the force. And here it is. I've explained resolution of forces. So this should not be a hassle any longer. So we are done with resolution of forces. The next thing I want to do is I want to resolve that particular question, that particular equilibrium question again. So yeah, here is the question. So this was the question that caused a lot of turmoil, but I am going to resolve it and I will explain very well this time. And it will be much easier now since you understood how to resolve forces. So I said in equilibrium, upward forces are equal to downward forces, and total clockwise moments are equal to total anti-clockwise moments. That is, this is your time. This is your time. So what is clockwise? Clockwise means the way the time moves. So your clock moves in this direction, Abi. So it goes from 1, 2, 3. So your clock moves in this direction. And anti-clockwise is when it is moving opposite clockwise. It's also called counterclockwise. It is the same thing. So when it is moving opposite to clock, your clock does not go like this now. It goes like this. So this is clockwise. This is anti-clockwise. We are settled on that. Now, this is a pivot. So taking moment about pivot, you take your clockwise moment to be equal to your anti-clockwise moment. What is moment? Moment is force times perpendicular distance. Force multiplied by perpendicular distance. I explained all these things in that video. So please go back if you want a deeper understanding of moments of a force. So force multiplied by perpendicular distance. This is a force, right? You know, we always take moments about pivots. This is our pivot. So anything that we are doing is along this side. So P will be along this side. 40 Newton will be along this side. So if I want to take moment of 40 Newton along the pivot, it's going to be what? This direction. And this direction, is it clockwise or anti-clockwise? This is a clockwise moment. That is, let's say this was 5 p.m., this will be 6 p.m., this will be 7 p.m., this will be 8 p.m. And this is still going the way the clock moves. So 40 Newton to the pivot is our clockwise moment, right? Now, the main issue here is this P. I said I resolved P to the vertical, and then I took the moment along the pivot. I resolved P along the vertical, that is, I straightened P, and then I took the moment of P along the pivot. I said resolving P along the vertical. I said resolving P along the vertical will give me P sine 30. Abi? I said resolving P along the vertical will give me P sine 30. How did I get P sine 30? It is because P is not making an angle with the vertical. I mentioned this few minutes ago. When a force is making an angle with an axis, and you are resolving that force to that same axis, it will be the cos equivalent. P is making 30 degrees with the horizontal. This is horizontal. This is the x-axis. So if I want to resolve P horizontally, it will be P cos 30. I said when a force is not making an angle with an axis, and you are resolving that force to that same axis, it will be P sine theta. That is P sine 30 in this case. P is not making an angle with the vertical. So if I'm resolving P along the vertical or to the vertical, it will be the sine equivalent of P. So that was how I got P sine 30 here. Right? That was how I got P sine 30 here. If I was resolving P along the horizontal, it would have been P cos 30. And if I was resolving P along the vertical, it would be what? P sine 30. And that is how I got my P sine 30. I want to believe we are clear on that now. So don't forget, clockwise moment is equal to anti-clockwise moment. So I will take this along this axis. Along this. And this is a clockwise moment. That is, if this was 1 p.m., this would be 12, this would be 11, 10, 9, 8. And time does not go in that direction. Time moves in this direction. So this is clockwise. And this is anti-clockwise. Clockwise moment equals anti-clockwise moment. My clockwise moment is 40 multiplied by the perpendicular distance between 40 and the pivot. That is 40 multiplied by 20 centimeters. And then the moment of P sine 30 along this pivot will be what? P sine 30 itself, that is the force, multiplied by the perpendicular distance between P and the pivot. And what is the perpendicular distance between P and the pivot? That will be 30 plus 20, and that is 50 centimeters. That is the distance between P and this pivot. So I'll have this. Yeah, 40 multiplied by the perpendicular distance to the pivot, 40 multiplied by 20, P sine 30 vertically. You have to resolve vertically. You cannot resolve horizontally. Why can't you resolve horizontally? Because if you resolve horizontally, there is no how you want to take moment of an horizontal force along this pivot. Don't forget, your moment is your force multiplied by the perpendicular distance. When something is parallel forces are together. That is, they can never meet. These are parallel lines. But perpendicular means at 90 degrees. That is, this is a perpendicular force. This guy is perpendicular to this guy, and this guy is perpendicular to this guy. You are correct either ways. So y is perpendicular to x. At the same time, x is perpendicular to y. Right? So If you resolve P along the horizontal, that will be P cos 30, right? There is no how you want to take the moment of P cos 30 along this pivot, because the distance between P cos 30, this will be the distance between P cos 30 and the pivot will be on the same plane as the action of P cos 30 and the pivot. What do I mean by that? P cos 30 is horizontal. The distance between P cos 30 and the pivot is also horizontal. You have an horizontal distance between them. Do you understand that? So if you do this, you are not taking moment any longer, because moment says force multiplied by not distance but perpendicular distance. So you must find a perpendicular force to this pivot, and for you to do that, you must resolve P to the vertical, and that will be P sin 30. I've explained why it is P sin 30 and not P cos 30. It is P sin 30 because P is not making an angle with the vertical, right? So P sin 30 multiplied by the distance between P sin 30 and the pivot, that is 20 plus 30, that is 50. So 40 times 20 is equal to P sin 30 multiplied by 50. When you do your calculation, you are going to get your P as 32 Newton. You are going to get your P as 32 Newton. I believe I've cleared the hair and I've cleared your doubts now, right? So let's solve one more question. A follower messaged me and asked that I solve a particular question for the person. So I'll be doing that now. I will be wrapping up the video. This was the question. Hi sir, please, good afternoon. I saw your video on the moment of a force and I want you to help me with this question. A uniform beam 150 centimeter long, weighs 3.5 kilogram and is supported on knife edges at its ends. The beam supports a weight 7 kilogram at a distance of 30 centimeter from one end. Find the reactions of the support. Thank you, sir. So let's get straight into it. So this is the interpretation of the question. A uniform beam 150 centimeter long, that is from A to B, is 150 centimeter long, and they said it's uniform. It weighs 3.5 kilogram. The center of gravity of a uniform beam is always at the middle, at the center. What's center of gravity? Center of gravity is the point where all the resultant weight acts. That is, all the resultant weight of the beam acts at the center of gravity, and that is going to be at the middle. That is at the 75 centimeter mark. That is, from this point A to this middle is 75 centimeter, and from this middle itself to this point B is 75 centimeters. So that is why here to here is 75 centimeter. And if you had the distances here, 30 plus 45, that would be 75 centimeters. Cool, right? So it is uniform. That is why the weight is at the center. 3.5 kilogram, and then they said it weighs 3.5 kilogram. They did not say that the mass was 3.5 kilogram. They told you it weighs, which means that you must convert the mass that they gave you. You must convert it to weight. And don't forget how we convert mass to weight. Weight is equal to mass multiplied by acceleration due to gravity. Mass is 3.5, G is 10, 3.5 times 10, 35 Newton. So 35 Newton. Cool. The question went further, says, okay, and it's supported on knife edges at both ends. This is knife edge A, knife edge B. The beam supports a weight 7 kilogram at a distance of 30 centimeter from one end. Support a weight of 7 kilogram. Convert the weight to Newton. So that will be 7 times 10, that is 70. So a weight of 70 Newton at the 30 centimeter mark. Find the reactions at the support. Now, if it's from here to here is 75, it supports 7 kilogram at the 30 centimeter mark. What will be left between here? That will be 45. Abi? 75 minus 30 will be 45. So this is the interpretation of the question. Now, what the question is asking us to do is to find A along this. That is, when you take moment along the pivot of B, you use that to find A. You take moment along the pivot of A, you use that to find B, and then that is your final answer. So try that. Try that. Let's see. All right. I believe you got it, but verify now. We are going to do two things here. Two things are required of us to find the reactions at both supports. That is, find reaction at support A, find reaction at support B. To find reaction at support A, you take it along B. To find reaction at support B, you take it along A. Are we cool? Reaction at support A now. Don't forget I said to find reaction at support A, you take it along B. That is, it will be A multiplied by this. And then this 7 kilogram will be along here. And this 35 kilogram will also be along here. We are taking the moment along B to find A. And then if you want to find B, we take it along A. If you want to find A, we take it along B. If you want to find B, take it along A. So let's find A first. So we are taking it along B. A multiplied by this. A is going clockwise. That is, it's going in this direction. 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Clockwise. 35 and 70, they are going anti-clockwise. Right? So the addition of anti-clockwise will be equal to my clockwise. Addition of anti-clockwise, 35 and 70, will be equal to my clockwise, which is A, that I don't know. So we have this, A multiplied by 150, that is, the perpendicular distance of A to this pivot is 150, from the start of the beam to the end of the beam, 150 centimeters. 70 Newton, the perpendicular distance of 70 Newton along here is going to be 45 plus 75, which is 120 centimeter. The distance of 35 Newton to this place is 75 centimeter, because that's the distance between this guy and the pivot. So we have this. So 73.5 Newton is the reaction at A. We are done with that. To get the reaction at B, remember I said to find reaction at A, we took moment along B. To now find the reaction at B, we need to take moment along A, right? So what do? We go this direction, right? This direction and this direction. So in this case now, we are going anti-clockwise at the top, but we are going clockwise below. So it is still the same thing. Clockwise. Now in this case now, 70 Newton and 35 Newton are going clockwise, while my B is going anti-clockwise. But it does not still change anything. It is still correct, right? So my clockwise is still equal to my anti-clockwise. Always remember that. My clockwise equals to my anti-clockwise. All right. 70 times 30 plus 35 times 75 is equal to B times 150. B times 150, the distance between B and this place is also 150. From this edge to this edge, 150 centimeter. For 70 Newton now, the perpendicular distance between 70 Newton and this pivot is 30 centimeter. In this case, for when we were taking moment along this place, it was 120 centimeter because it was 45 plus 75. That is in this direction. But in this direction, it is just 30 centimeter that is between 70 Newton and our pivot. Settled. 35 is still 75. You know, it is at the middle. So if you are taking it in this direction, or you are taking it in this direction, it is always 75 since it is at the middle. 30 plus 45 is 75. So we are cool with that. So let's solve our question. So this is our reaction at B. Our reaction at B is 31.5 Newton, right? So there's a way to verify this. Remember when we started moment at first, I gave two rules. The first rule I gave was upward forces are equal to downward forces, and then clockwise moments are equal to anti-clockwise moments. Don't get it mixed up. Upward forces, not upward moments, are equal to downward forces. And then anti-clockwise movements, not forces now, are equal to clockwise movement. So the two rules are upward forces are equal to downward forces, clockwise movements are equal to anti-clockwise movements. Let's verify now. What are our upward forces here? A acting upward, B acting upward, 70 acting downward, and 35 Newton acting downwards. Let us verify if they are correct. A plus B, my upward forces, will be equal to 70 plus 35, which are my downward forces. What is A? A is 73.5. B is 31.5. Is equal to 70 plus 35 is 105. And then if you press this on your calculator, you will notice that 105 is equal to 105, which means we are actually very, very correct. This verifies our answer. So there is actually a shortcut for this. You don't need to go through this stress twice. You can just go through the stress once and you will get the second answer. You can get your A. Once you get your A to be 73.5, you can easily come and replace the value of A here to calculate B. A plus B is equal to 105. So A is 73.5 already. So your B is going to be 105 minus 73.5, and that will be 31.5. You've gotten your B without going through this stress. And if it was B you calculated at first too, you can calculate either of them at first. If it was B you calculated at first, you put the value of your 31.5 here. Then you subtract that from 105, you get your A to be 73.5. So either ways, you are still very correct. So you can choose to do any method that is fine by you. All right. I believe you enjoyed this video and you gained a lot. Kindly subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications for my future videos, and I'll see you next time.